Hi. How are
Hi,
you?
They're good
welcome.
though. They're cool.
I'm glad you made it.
Thanks.
Okay.
Yes, me
Awesome.
too. The sound
They
is
have a
really
big
crazy because I can
space.
hear the
Like, you know where the
background and I
Pfizer
can hear
building is?
everybody else.
Yeah.
I know it's
It's
hard when
inside of
everyone
that
is
then.
close right here.
Ah,
So
okay.
Yeah, it's
after the
pretty
event,
cool.
we
We
go
did.
to a more
I mean,
wide out room. Mute yourself during the presentation portion. That'd be awesome. This is one of our cameras here, so he's not blocking the view for you guys on purpose. And this is our other camera. Um, and our presenters are going to be up here, and we'll probably have about a half-hour discussion, and then we're going to open it up to Q&A afterwards. So feel free to raise your hand, and I can amplify your voice so that you'll be able to ask questions. And then afterwards, after the Q&A, we're going to go, there's an after party. So if you head to the exit outside the door, you'll see two portals. And Darcy is up in the top right there. Darcy, wave your hand. There she is. She is hosting one of the worlds, and it's one of the art galleries that we used at the end of last event. And a bunch of the art folks will actually be joining us. And then I have another world where I built actually beer pong in Altspace. So if you'd like to play beer pong, you can come hang out. So that's really it. We got about 1 minute left, and Jimmy, I think, is good to go. Streaming with sound off for the next 2 minutes. Want to make sure you went live, and we are good. So I think we are going to get started. And
Cool.
Elvis and Lewis, you guys are good?
Yeah.
Think so.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're good.
So actually, if audience members, if you want to just come up to more in the front here, that would be awesome. Kind of spread out, and that way it'll look cool from
So-
the live stream.
Right?
It's pretty great.
So I got, let's see, 7:59 on my phone. So I'm gonna wait a few more seconds. And Jimmy, you set? All right. All right, I got 8 o'clock, so
Sweet.
let's get going. So welcome to NYVR second edition in Altspace. Thank you everyone for coming tonight. It is a pleasure to be hosting. Tonight we have an awesome show. Awesome. Good to see some hand claps. I'm gonna head to the back here and have a seat. And I will make some introductions. Tonight we have some super informed speakers on our topic of virtual production. Let me skip ahead. Hold on a second. So first we have Mr. Elvis. Elvis is formerly with the Blue Sky Studios, but he has spent a ton of time in this space. And next we have Mr. Lewis Smithingham, who is Director of Creative Solutions Media Monks. I'm going to have them introduce themselves next. And I'm really thrilled to present this topic tonight because it's frankly a topic that I know so little about, but I'm frankly think that it's just so disruptive in the movie making industry and how content is going to get created. And these gentlemen here are going to help us all understand this really cool topic. So let's get into it. Elvis, would you mind actually starting with your introductions?
Yeah, sure. Everyone can hear me? Everyone good? Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, cool.
Well.
So hi everyone. Thanks DJ for organizing this. I'm Elvis, and I'm a technologist. I've been working in technology for about 20 years now, and I've done this in web, music, games, and of course more recently in feature film animation and immersive technologies. And I had the opportunity to work at Blue Sky Studios for the last 13 years. And if you're wondering, it is that Blue Sky Studios that you probably heard in the trade mags. We are being closed down next April. That's the well, I'm not gonna dwell on that. But so tonight, I want to talk more about virtual production. And at Blue Sky, one of the things that I was able to jump into from the get-go was the fact that I got started right in immersive media, like right from the get-go. I'm sorry, I think there's an echo. It's kind of weird.
Oh, is
Yeah.
there?
Yeah, DJ, I think it's coming from you. Your mouth is moving while he's talking.
Oh, no.
Sorry,
Okay.
DJ, I think it's coming
I
from
keep
you.
hearing
Your mouth
myself.
is moving while he's talking.
All right, so right from the get-go, I was able to start in immersive media. I started as an artist and technical lead in the stereoscopic 3D department at Blue Sky. And that really was an interesting time because we were trying to figure out how to tell our stories in this new immersive medium, right? This was how to make 3D movies for feature film animation. And no one really knew how to do that. And so I spent a good portion of my earlier career at Blue Sky trying to figure out that sort of storytelling, again, within this immersive medium. And then fast forward several years later, we were looking into VR, and we realized that there was this groundswell of interest from the artists, from a lot of devs within Blue Sky, and we were able to pitch successfully to create a whole new group at Blue Sky called the Immersive Technologies Group, a group that I currently lead right now. And the goal of this group has always been to enable any artist at the studio to step into any film set using these technologies in AR, VR, real-time game engines, and with the mindset of telling better stories to make better movies. And so, tonight I'm gonna go through a whirlwind of some of the higher profile virtual production projects that you may have heard of, and I'll talk a little bit about what we were doing at Blue Sky in this and that space, and it'll be an interesting night. So that's me.
Great. Let's have Lewis give his introduction.
Yeah. Hey, Lewis Smithingham, can you hear me? Sorry, I normally have side tone on my mic. Yeah, great. So, hey, I'm Lewis Smithingham, Director of Creative Solutions at Media Monks. Prior to that, I was at a VR company called 30 Ninjas that was owned by a feature film director, Doug Lyman. I've made a career out of finding ways to tell stories in new mediums. So whether it's gigantic zoopraxiscopes or whether it's looking at VR, I think one of the things that's interesting, and we're at this incredible groundswell moment, which reminds me sort of why VR took off again. I mean, VR is an older technology, but it came back in 2015 in part because the price of accelerometers went down. And so you look at right now where we're at this moment where real time is really coming to fore, and then COVID happens, and it causes everybody who's working in any form of production, and I truly mean any form of image making, to suddenly take this very different way of working much, much, much more seriously. And I think I want to talk, and I talk about it in a bit, extending the definition of virtual production to not just mean, you know, your typical Mandalorian LED walls, but looking at different ways. My company does commercials for Oreos, for example, and we started looking at how do you change packaging in commercials, how do you shoot macro, and looking at all the different ways that we can use virtual tools to improve production, streamline production, and frankly, make cooler stuff quicker. There's some fascinating stuff I've seen in the past couple months where people given the tools to grow and change, and we've all seen the amazing thing that happened today with capturing reality that was purchased by Unreal, and looking at all the different tools available to everybody. Now I think we're really seeing a sea change moment in storytelling. So it's something I'm super interested in. I think the last note, and this is a personal thing that I'm super interested in, is like, how do we innovate within esports, for example, with real time and with using virtual production tools, which is, it's so strange watching a League of Legends match and not seeing them use virtual tools. Anyway, side the point, another thing, and it has been interesting. I've worked a lot in 360 video production, and we're doing the NBA in VR again. We did it last season in the bubble. We're doing it again this season, and looking at how we've changed things for, I don't know if you've seen the newer Oculus Venues environment, but how we've pivoted around that. So I'd love to just dig into that in a bit, but thank you. I won't take any more time. Super honored to be here. Super stoked to be next to you, man. You've done some incredible stuff. And like, hey man, I always have a little bit of imposter syndrome around this stuff. I'm so excited to be here. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So let's get right into it. And I want to start with Elvis. Really helping us to define what virtual production is. I think that it seems like an obvious thing, but for me, it's a bit of a mystery. And Elvis, just let me know. I'll advance the slides for you and take it away.
Yeah, sure thing. Thanks, DJ. So yeah, virtual production. It's and Lewis, you know, I think you'll agree that it's a bit of a buzzword, right? It's a pretty hot thing. It's something that everyone seems to know about, and you know, it's a very overused term in my opinion. But in trying to define it, I usually come across like two definitions that I like, and the first one is virtual production is the intersection between what is real and not real. And you know, to me, that's really poetic. It's just a nice way of looking at this. It leaves a lot of room for the imagination, and you know, it also talks about the times that we're living in. We're in an amazing time where, you know, we have these high fidelity displays either on your desk or something you put over your eyes for VR headset, and we have these machines, these graphics cards that are able to render out these images in such real time that you're able to manipulate these digital assets. So it is really, you know, it speaks loudly about this interface between real and not real. Now, another definition, something that's a little closer to you know, what I do, it's more grounded in reality. Virtual production is a tool set, as a tool set in movie making, where you can combine live action footage in real time with real time computer graphics. And so again, it's you know, it speaks to the times that we're living in, these exciting times where, you know, you do not need a physical set. In fact, you intentionally omit a physical set or characters, and everything is all done in virtual, within the computer. So, you know, with that said, the next few slides, I want to take you on a whirlwind tour of some of these high-profile projects that you probably have heard of or seen in the trade mags. And I'll just go through some of these. So the first one we're looking at here right now is the virtual production system that was done for the Lion King remake, the one that was done on CG. And what's really interesting is that if you look to the image over my right shoulder here, you see a film crew, and they're all in headsets with HTC Vive wands, and they're experiencing a Lion King set, like a Savannah, I'm assuming, within virtual reality. And it's a shared environment that you can go into and do some location scouting or collaborate and talk about how they want to set up for the next shot. So this is interesting because this is essentially a multiplayer game they're playing, and to boot, this is a seasoned film crew. This crew is highly experienced. They're used to being on a live action set. These are people that have worked with live action environments, cameras, and they know how to handle themselves in the real world. But now they're being tasked to do this entire movie using this tool set, this real-time tool set. So while the image on the right is, it has all in these headsets, the image on the left, you see they're all looking at the set through 2D, LCD screens. But look at what their hands are doing. Their hands are on gears and levers and buttons. And these are things that, they've gotten used to in terms of like muscle memory. They know how to work these tools to get the certain look, certain timing that they're trying to get for the different shots. And what they've gone out and done is they've taken these pranks and widgets, they've digitized the signals, and they sent them to Unity. And so, this is a way of leveraging this film crew's vast many years of experience and bringing that sort of experience and leveraging that sort of look for making this movie in CG. So let's go next. Yep. Everyone knows this one, right? This is the Mandalorian. So this one, in this example, they've taken the notion of making a movie immersively to the extreme. So they've taken the foreground, midground sets, they've taken the actors, they've taken the cameras, and they've put them into something called the volume. You kind of see it in the background here. I'm kind of pointing to this. But it's essentially a soundstage that has motion capture and is completely encompassed in 70-foot LED panels. And it's great because now they can, use Unreal Engine and project the entire background, the entire virtual environment onto these LED panels. And with the touch of a button, they can completely rotate the set. They can change the lighting, and then when the camera goes and films the actual character, the actor acting on the soundstage, you're also getting all of that light, all of the reflections on the Mandalorian's armor. All of that makes it to the final pixel for free, for free with an asterisk. So, right? I mean, so this is definitely another way of looking at how to create that sense of immersion, right? You're literally putting people into inside these giant LED walls. Next slide. So I put this here because I don't know when's the last time any of you have gone to American Museum of Natural History and you've gone down to the Hall of Mammals or the African animals exhibits. So you see something like this. This is the Alaskan brown bear diorama, and you have this brown bear, this taxidermist stuffed bear posed in its natural environments, and you have some of the foreground and midground shrubbery, some of the lighting that's kind of hidden from the top of the diorama. And then if you look at the back wall, it's a curved wall where the artists have meticulously painted like a realistic environment so that this whole image that you see feels somewhat realistic. And they've also meticulously painted out, I know you probably can't see this, but where the curved wall meets the ground, they hide it and they blend it in with paint and they hide it with more props. So, this is something that I'm reminded of every time I see something, with the Mandalorian. This is something, another way of creating a virtual set, and that's been with us for such a long, long time. So next slide. And just to give you a sense of, what it's like to be on like a set like this. This is outside of LA. I was able to visit one of these outfits, and it literally is a small space with backside top LED panels, and you can see that the actor on that motorcycle, he's being lit in the way that you would expect him to be lit in a forest environment. Next slide. And then I put this slide in just to show you what it looks like when you have it turned off. So it's kind of boring, but you know, this is what it looks like. Next slide. So here I just want to quickly point out that so in terms of virtual production, there are smaller studios that have adopted Unreal Engine and Unity as a major part of their pipelines for animation. So these two examples, it's episodic TV streaming content. These are, well, I wouldn't say Disney is a small studio, but this one here, this is Baymax Streams, a collaboration between Disney and Unity. And this was released, I think, probably a year or two ago. And it was a good example of how you can take content, you know, Disney IP, film animation IP, and make it usable in real time. And then this one, the one above to I guess screen right, that's Zafari, and that's also done by a smaller studio using Unreal Engine. Next slide. Cool. So just to quickly touch upon what we've done at Blue Sky. So you've seen a couple examples, right? The Lion King with the crew that you need to go into virtual production to do all the different aspects of filmmaking, as well as the Mandalorian. We have this giant setup. Well, you know, even at Blue Sky Studios, even though we're, you know, part of Disney, we don't have those giant budgets. We don't have those giant spaces. So we do what makes sense for us. And, you know, we're heavily inspired by The Lion King and The Mandalorian. So what we did was adopt some of this technology and, you know, make it work for us, make it make sense for us. And in this case, we built a lightweight wireless camera rig where it's operable by a single camera artist. The idea was always to have a single camera artist come into the tracking space and have them be able to pick up the camera, do a shoot, and then send their camera moves to their desk for any sort of refinement. And so this is our rig. You can see that it's based off a VR HTC Vive tracking volume. There is I'm pointing to this. I wish I had a laser. There's a viewport that the artist can look through on the rig, and you know, as the person is walking through the environment, they're able to see the environment change with them as they make their way through the set. And the two pictures on the right over here, the top one is one of the camera artists holding onto the camera rig, and then his fellow artist is pushing him around on a dolly chair just to show it's a poor man's dolly. So another way of getting a smooth camera motion across the floor. And then the lower right image, we have an artist, and he's moving the camera rig from like where his knee is all the way up to over his shoulders. And we're demonstrating that, oh yeah, now we can do a crane move. And in the virtual set, even though he's only moving several feet, in the virtual set, he is moving from the bottom of the building to like 30 feet up to the top of the building. So these are some of the pretty cool things we could do with this camera rig that we built. I think next slide. All right, so this is my final slide. And this is the NYVR Meetup. So I have to say, you know, something real quick about VR. And one thing I want to mention is that one of the first things we did was the most logical thing of all, right? Stick a camera artist into a VR headset and you see what happens. And if you look at the photos, you can see how awkward and you can see the terrible accidents that are about to happen with this guy. You can see the cable, you can see how he's holding the rig, and it's really unbalanced. So it turns out, despite all the assurances and the fact that in the right picture over here on the right, that we made it wireless. Despite all these reassurances, when you tell a camera artist to, hey, you have the space, pick up the camera, and now we want you to act out your camera move, they will not do it. It becomes very stiff, becomes very robotic because they don't want to smash into anything. So this was not the way to go. But what we did get out of this was we took them out of the headset and we put a little screen on the rig for them to see the environment. But we retained the VR aspect of this in the sense that we leverage the preciseness of the HTC Vive tracking volume to be able to get precise camera moves that would make it into the film. I think that's it.
That is excellent job. All right, so Louis, do you have some other things to add?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think one of the things that's interesting is we started hitting on the tooling, and as somebody who came up through camera department, when we started doing virtual production, I had a really hard time. Like, you're throwing this Red Rock micro rig on your shoulder, and it doesn't weigh the same as a camera. And like, I think we talked about this beforehand, where like it was this paradigm where I was operating where, okay, you're going to operate the drone, and now you're going to operate the handheld camera, and I could not land a handheld camera move until they put the trackers on an actual camera, and then I could land all the camera moves. I knew where my hands went, all that sort of stuff, and it weighed the way it was supposed to. I guess the other thing I'll say is the other major challenge I ran into, the second I'm driving this drone, I'm holding an Xbox controller. It's drone in engine. I told you, like, I couldn't, the first 3 days of our shoot stalled because I couldn't do it if I didn't invert Y. Because I played too much Microsoft Flight Simulator as a kid. And like, I guess, what challenges have you run into as far as physical tooling when you're dealing with, camera artists who are perhaps more used to dealing with, engine, and then but then are now having to hold a camera, and in the opposite direction you see Roger Deakins can't operate a virtual camera unless it looks exactly the same way, a Fisher dolly looks like in real life. How have you, dealing with such high tier artists, how have you reconciled that?
Well, I mean, I'm still here. A lot of the artists, actually, we had the opposite problem at the studio. A lot of the artists were more used to cameras through keyboard and mouse, right? Yeah. And so it was interesting trying to bring them into the tracking volume, picking up a camera. Our cinematographer, James Williams, he kind of served as the point person to our mentor, to actually teach these CG artists how to pick up a camera and use it in real life. So it was a really interesting and educational experience all around for everyone.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I mean, a lot of where I've run into trouble is like, working with artists that like are, they've learned their brushes, and you give them a new brush, they can't paint a painting. And so having them figuring out a way to make that same brush has been really interesting. But at the same time, once they get to that, they realize how magical and wonderful it is, instead of this very frustrated sort of conversation. One of the things I wanted to hit on as well, I saw your Natural History Museum piece. So my first job in the real film industry was as moved to Canada, and I tried to join the union. They're like, there's no jobs open. And they're like, well, wait a second. Actually, you could be a rear screen projectionist. And I was Canada's only union rear screen projectionist for about 6 weeks. And it was, again, it's seeing that same thing, which that's an old technology, and seeing that come to fore again has been really fascinating. Certainly a lot better than the old rear screens we used to have to use.
Great. Could we?
We're a giant company, and so it's we're a company that really loves to innovate and do crazy and insane things. And I'm very, very grateful that I get to do the job I have. Because a lot of the time it just feels like I'm playing with toys. I was literally on a call 2 hours ago, driving around a model ship and making sound effect noises in front of clients, which was a good moment for me. But moving on to the next slide. At my past job, at my past company, I worked on a project, and I wanted to bring in another use of how we use virtual reality to create content and use virtual production to create that. This is a reality show we did called Virtually Dating with Condé Nast and Facebook. If you move on to the next slide. And the challenge was to take people in VR, which we've all spent a lot of time in VR, and to create a reality show that was just like a normal reality show, except instead of taking people on dates to the bowling alley, which we did take them to a bowling alley in VR, we took them on a magical fantasy quest like this. And all this was done in engine on a motion capture stage in New York. We shot it at Silver Spoon. I actually think the mocap section of their stage is actually now a very large LED volume. I think it's probably New York's largest LED volume, actually. We shot it there, all in mocap. We had 4 cameras, so 3 in engine and 1 that was an actual reality show camera following the round, but tracked to get that human handheld feel. That's one thing you learn as you dig in virtual production. One of the things that immediately jumps out to me as a gamer is the handheld cameras in video games never feel like handheld cameras until a person is actually tracking that movement. There's a realness to that that really is textural. And so that's something we worked on with this show. If you move on to the next slide, this is a split screen to show you the motion capture volume, and they're all in VR headsets, wearing VR backpacks. It's a huge technical challenge to get all these pieces to work and play. We're doing 4 different scenes a day. But what was great is we're able to do 4 entirely different venues every single day. What's also great is a lot of these assets, and this is something like if you want to get into virtual production, like what's magical right now is this wasn't like when I was starting in film where you had to get a very expensive camera and then to try and figure out how to pirate an Avid license on your parents' internet connection. Instead, like you can just download it, Unreal and Unity. You can download them. You can take the tools. These are actually licensed free assets. They're for a video game called Paragon. And you can sort of learn a lot of these tools. And there's interesting stuff you can actually do with just your phone to connect to facial tracking. If you move on to the next slide. This is another scene, like we did these horror scenes, and one of the things that was great was working with physical space and figuring out how to do that virtually. I'd love to see more production shifting in completely into this rather than this space in between where we're using LED screens. I think a lot. So if you move on to the next slide, this was 2 people on a date, and this is showing the matching between the 2 spaces to show sort of what it ended up looking like. And again, all around motion capture and using these tools to create what was quite frankly is a reality show. Like we all have opinions about reality shows. Like I actually think I'm a huge fan of 90 Day Fiancé, but I guess to that end, like creating just a piece of content in this space felt very interesting and very cool. It's a couple of years ago. If you move on to the next. Now what we do now is I work at a company that splits itself between film production, creating content, and also innovating in advertising. And one of the things, having worked on set, when you're dealing with a product, and I'll talk about Oreo because I have slides about this, and also because I'm a super fan, shout out to anybody who's tried the new strawberry cream donut flavor that came out yesterday. But to that end, that's a brand that has 88 flavors. And they're coming up with brand new flavors every day. And if you've ever been on a product photography set, you know, this is like the most like science sort of project you've ever seen where the food isn't actually food, it's Play-Doh, and they're using glycerin, and it's costing, you know, $20,000, $30,000, $50,000, couple $100,000 a day per product just to get one shot where the camera swoops in and the Oreo or whatever is rotating. I remember I worked on a commercial where we were filming a bottle of perfume, and it took us 16 hours to get one camera move right. And then, so the point was how do we take this and disrupt this model, if you move on to the next slide, and help brands start worrying about how they do cooler stuff and interesting stuff rather than stressing out over costs. And so we said, why don't we figure out how to do Oreos in CG? What's to stop it? And it turned out, and this was a GIF, but it's still right now, and I can send you links. We went to Unreal, and we asked them to help us research this and figure out how they could use elements of their engine to create a real-time cookie that was sellable, with the idea being that if you could change out the cookie for multiple markets, like if you're looking at, for example, Oreo, 88 flavors, distributed in 16 different markets. There's 4 different types of packaging per different line within each market. You start seeing how much stuff you can create, and the cost savings are pretty incredible, but also the creativity flavor options are pretty incredible too, if you move on to the next slide. And so that's what we're doing here. So this is a completely CG Oreo cookie. There is nothing real about this. It's not even created from photogrammetry textures. This is a laboratory cookie. I would make a joke that it's completely vegan, but the Oreo cookie is already completely vegan, so redundant. But the point is the idea to use Unreal and to use Engine, to use virtual production to infinitely innovate and work in different ways around this product. And so this is, while this isn't a giant Mandalorian screen, this is a CG cookie. And we took this to the next level, and you can see this in the next slide, where we started thinking about how can we bring this to other products? How can we work with different ways, whether it's using screens, whether it's using other ways to configure? How can we sell products in cool ways where they're CG and where you take that model and extend it further? So this is a project we worked on with HP, and where we've worked on with Omen as well. We're looking at ways that we can use Engine and take advantage of Engine to really drive virtual production in our shows, where, sometimes in virtual production, the thing that's most talked about, because it's generally the sexiest, is the big LED walls that are replacing the background. But sometimes you want to replace foreground elements or subject elements, or say you're shooting a monster movie and you want to be able to frame the actor properly on set with the monster. So to that end, you use camera tracking to bring in a CG thing into a physical environment. So I've used a tool called NCAM, N for Nancy, NCAM, to do this. And in this case, we started looking at can we put CG printers where perhaps the product isn't ready yet, or we want to make production line changes. Can we bring those? Can we shoot an environment and drop that into the environment? So moving on to the next. And this is a project we did with LG in a similar way, where we took a real-time kitchen, which you can see in the top right, a real kitchen, sorry, and tried to replace it with a real-time kitchen to see how that would work together, and how we would be able to build these worlds in a way that was coherent, interesting, and unique to individual users, so that we could switch it out with different products. It's all different variations on using Engine and using real-time to create production and create production-ready assets completely virtually. The idea being, in the same way Lion King is shot completely with not real lions, I don't need a real kitchen to shoot anymore. I can film the whole thing virtually, and that allows me to make a lot of efficiencies, but also, to be honest, change things to personalize it. I mean, I remember the first time the team pitched this to me, when they sent me the printer. On the previous slide, there's a shot, and you can see in the corner, there's a magazine on the desk. And when they showed me the print, they made sure that the latest, I think it's Game Informer, they had on the desk, so that I would be like, oh, yeah, that ad, I'd get that ad. The printer was black as well. For those that know me, I love the color black. Moving on to the next slide. Now, this is something that our team within the car industry has been doing for a very long time. Car industry has a lot of challenges where products aren't necessarily done before the commercial is made, and there's lots of different issues they run into. We actually just merged with a company called Staud, who do this in really innovative ways. They're out of Stuttgart, Germany. And so one of the things we've been looking at is how do we take the technology behind a car configurator and drive that into other products, but also innovate within here. So whether it's looking at how you use on-set production where you don't have the physical car and you use trackers, or how do we drive production in a new way using this similar model. I think that's the last of what of my deck, but let's see. Yeah, no, we're good. So that's the world we're working on. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Can we get a round of applause for our presenters tonight? Awesome. So I think we have a few minutes for Q&A. So if you want to raise your hand, I'll be able to hopefully amplify your voice. And I think Woody over there has a question, and just give me 2 seconds and I'll see if I can amplify your voice, and I'll wave your hand when.
Can you hear me? Is this working?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay.
Yep, you should be good now.
You know what? It's hilarious. This is tremendously embarrassing. I thought I was pressing the clap emoji, so here I am, questionless. So this is my first time using Altspace. My apologies.
That's okay. I'm just happy I made your voice actually amplified.
Yeah.
So any other questions from the audience? Oh, there we go, Eric. Actually, why don't you ask it? We'll see if we can hear.
Hi there. So the question is, when you make the various things, how do you distribute it and let other people see them in VR?
In terms of, do you mean like in studio, or do you mean as a final deliverable?
As a final deliverable to the public.
Copy that. So it really depends upon the final platform. In studio, we tend to go with unedited, like in editor, when we're working with them. But whether it's still images, whether it's video, in terms of the final deliverable, it's rarely actually delivered in VR for a lot of our products. If they are, it's rendered out either as an equirectangular, as a video file, or if it's rendered out as a game engine file. At least that's our process.
Great. Any other questions? I think Dragon Hill in the back there.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me okay? Hello?
Mm-hmm.
You can hear me? Yep. Okay, cool. Okay, the question I have is because I do watch Mandalorian, and I did notice kind of the volume that they use. How do I put it? I don't have a lot of room for moving around. I'm certain a lot of other people don't. If I had to try finding a bigger space, what is like a recommended size? Like, 330 feet by 30 feet, 100 feet by 100 feet. What's a general size area that you find useful for doing this type of filming?
In our case, we actually started off with a really small room. Well, small as in our space was like a 12 by 12 area that we just marked some spot on the floor with some tape, and we found that was quite constricting. And so we were actually really excited to move into a new space, and the new space was going to give us about 20 by 20, and we felt like that gave us a lot more breathing room. But in theory, you can probably go up to 30 by 30 or 40 by 40. I can't remember. The HTC Vive, the latest edition with the new lighthouses, it allows for precise tracking even at such larger distances. At that point, you probably want to have like at least 4 lighthouses, maybe like one each corner, just so you don't, so you have coverage.
Yeah, I mean, my answer would be, this sounds annoying, but like it depends upon your story. If you're doing a story that's very tight, or if you're filming Oreos, like literally we've used TVs as our virtual production stage. But I think The Mandalorian was 60 feet across, if I'm not mistaken. But there's elements of that when you watch it, it still feels like a John Ford Western, where like you can tell they're sort of, the backdrop ends just over there. So like, let's
Right.
not move the camera further. The question, like, I mean, if you're doing heavy duty action, you're going to need a big space. And there are ways to even expand the size. Like on virtually dating, we looked at using essentially tracker data. So we weren't using the Vive, we were actually using riffs plugged into a backpack. And so that was allowing us to track the backpacks and the headset in the mocap volume, which extended the size of our volume. That's similar to how NCAM works. NCAM works using some depth tracking data and doesn't necessarily need the same, or like when I've done big like virtual sports shows where you have a star field tracker. But like, I hate to sound obtuse, but I would go with, what's your story? Is your story, like, one of my favorite films takes place in a 10-foot room. It's a film called Family Nest. It's a Hungarian film. It's amazing, but it's in a 10-foot room. Or do you need, The Searchers, where you need giant, giant New Mexican spaces? Sorry, like, but in terms of the average space you'll see, I think most volumes are somewhere in the range of 15 feet to 30 feet.
Great. I think we have time for maybe one more question. Andrew over there. Andrew, you let me mic you up, but
All right. Hey, Lewis, how you doing, buddy?
Hey, good to see you, buddy.
I got a question for both. Did I just drop out? No, okay.
Here you are.
Sorry. I'm having some connection issues out here in Los Angeles. In any case, my question is, how has this new production methodology or pipeline affected your creative process? And in doing so, has it created new roles within the organization of the people who make the content?
Yeah, I'll let you go first.
Yeah. I don't know about creating new roles because, when we went into this, when we started to explore virtual production, it was always with the intent that we wanted to have our artists more creative, right? To be able to create things that weren't, I mean, everyone's heard, right? They've watched a feature film animation or anything, and they're like, oh, that camera looks kind of CG. And that's the sort of thing we were trying to avoid because, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of the practicing camera artists, they're actually behind the desk and keyboard, and they know how to, move their camera up and then rotate, and then, it's quite broken down in those respects. And so one of the things that we noticed was when we brought the artist into the tracking volume, they would do a camera move, and they would realize that when they were doing this camera move that they're trying to replicate that they had done before at their desk behind a keyboard and mouse. After the 20th time of trying to replicate that same camera move, what they realized was that wasn't realistic. Twisting around, moving forward, doubling back, obviously tracking some character in the set. They realized that what they were doing was just way too exhausting for any person to physically do. And so after like the 20th time and realizing that this is super exhausting, they left the tracking volume, but you could see that they left with this new idea that, well, maybe this thing that I've been doing behind the keyboard and mouse, this particular type of camera move, maybe I need to ground it in reality. And so you can see that the gears, their heads are starting to move, and they're taking this as feedback from what they did in the tracking volume back to their desk. And then you see this feedback loop just close up. So the next time they do a camera move in CG, the hope is they take this real world actual experience, and now it it helps them define what looks good, what looks real, and again, avoid the that sort of looks CG problem. So I think it was definitely one of those really cool moments that we saw with these sort of interactions.
I think to answer your question, so your first question was that what sort of barriers have creative run into? I think my whole job and my team's job, like I have a ridiculous title, creative solutions. I'm not allowed. Creative shouldn't ever have to hear no. They should. It's our job as technical people and as people that sit as creative technologists, empower them to do what they do best, and give them the tools that they need best. Now, to that end, in terms of job titles, you run in the same direction where right now I need somebody who can program large-scale DMX lighting boards, but also knows how to program in an engine. And so there's been a need for more people who work as translators or have multiple discipline skills and are able to think in multiple spaces than just a linear straight up camera operator. I need somebody who can camera op and knows Python. Need somebody who can think about how you do lighting, but also like who can tell me what a 50K would look like there, but also how that might look in an engine. So I think the biggest thing and the most important thing as technological people and creatives is to not say no unless it relates to money, but there's always more budget somewhere, but is more to say yes, but we'll figure out a new way to do it. And in the same way that like I couldn't nail a shot until I had a physical camera rigged on the camera rig. That's the sort of thing we want to be doing, to be able to empower creatives to tell their best stories and to do the most exciting work and the coolest work. But there is huge opportunity for people who are open-minded, know new skills, and frankly, like just are able to play in two spaces other than just think in a linear way.
Awesome. Well, I think we're going to wrap it up. One more round of applause for our amazing speakers, Elvis and Lewis. Just want to thank both of you guys for shedding some light on this. It's really amazing conversation. And with that, we're going to kill the live stream. Thank you so much to Jimmy and KSNBN, TV for broadcasting. And everyone is welcome to come to the after party. If you head out towards the exit, you'll see two portals, and we'll be hanging out, and you'll be able to meet Elvis and Lewis and have some one-on-one conversations. So thank you again, and we'll see you next month for the next NYVR.
See you next month.
Thank you.
That was fun.
Look, that was cool. That was really cool. The Oreos. I hadn't seen any images until now. So nice.
The weirdest stuff.